Well, hello. Welcome to the Terry Cole Show live. Why can you see that? Oh, that's a weird setup. Anyway, hey people, welcome. Join me. Let's take a deep breath together, shall we? Say hello down the sidebar when you get here in the chat. Tonight's Terry Cole Show live is going to be about effective communication and how listening can really deepen the intimacy in your relationship. I'm going to share my personal experience of being on a meditation retreat with my husband a couple of weeks ago, where we had 2 full days of silence. That was a little scary. Not terrible, but a little. Hi, welcome. Hello, everyone. And so I'm just all amped about communication and about how can we become better listeners? So before we get into the content, I'm going to let people get here. So say hi when you come in so I can see you, because I do see you. Can you hear me? Can I assume you can? Someone would be texting me if you couldn't, I imagine. I'm using my mic, but it's over here. Maybe I should move it a little. Well, welcome. Welcome on this Thursday evening. Well, hello from London. Hi, Christine. And hi, Lass. Who else we got? Hello, Mystic Magnification. What is it? Magnification. Right on. You can hear me. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Hi, Breakthrough Moment. Hey, Gary from North Carolina. I got family down there. Welcome to tonight's live show. I'm so excited. I had so much fun with you people the last time we did this. I wanted to do it again. So, how do you communicate with a difficult team leader who has a very rude tone? Oof, hate a rude tone. Don't worry, I'll hit that. Well, hello from the Bahamas. How are you? Someone said your videos about passive-aggressive behavior really opened my brain. Well, that makes me so happy. Holla, my lady, so happy to see you. Well, hello, Anna. How are you? Hey, Jill. Welcome. I'm so excited to see all you guys. It's so fun. This is kind of like a sleepover, even though it's only going to be about 30 minutes long. But it's like an international big fat group hug of people who care about their relationships and want to live a happy, fulfilling life. Right? Right. So as you come in, say hi. We got lots of people joining us, but I am going to kind of move it into what we're talking about. Oh, hi from New Hampshire. I say that and then I go back to the people. You've changed my life. Thank you. Oh, see ya. Hello with you from Huntington Beach, Cali. Thanks, Susan. I'm happy to see you. There you go. I'm welcoming you. Well, hi, Debbie from Calgary. I know you. I was just answering your question. Hey, Gloria. Is that Gloria Newman from Hackensack, New Jersey? If it is, hi. Well, hello, other people who are joining. We got Anna, we got Eileen from Florida, we got Arizona in the house. So many of you from all over the world. I love it. How the internet has made us be able to just be friends. We're just able to be together. It's so amazing. So I want to know I got a couple of questions that came in, and I'm going to give you my 2 cents on that type of communication. But I also want to know if you have any questions. So I'm going to hit the first one that came in about having a difficult boss. I did get a haircut, Anna. I got them all cut. I cut about that much off yesterday. Well, hi, Vermont. How you doing? Hi, Kelly. Thanks for coming. Thanks for noticing my haircut, Anna. I appreciate it. I feel like I lost 10 pounds of long hair. Anyway, so the question, let's hit the first question that was about having a difficult supervisor, basically, who has a rude tone. Part of it is that when you're dealing with a power structure, right, it's different. A rude tone with someone who is sort of on the same as you is different than a rude tone from a boss. So part of it is get immune to it, because you can't like tone police your boss necessarily. And I wouldn't mirror the tone. I would do the opposite of the tone. And I don't mean be a doormat. I literally mean if he's harsh, you can say, oh, hey, kindness, and you can say, hey, is everything okay? Like part of it is you acknowledging it sort of, but not letting him lower your vibe. My teacher, David G, would say the highest vibe always wins. So if you don't let him dictate the vibe, I feel like your high vibe will eventually win. Because here's the thing with a boss, it's not the same as it being a boyfriend, a best friend, your sister. Those are people where when there's no power structure, we have a different ability. And if you were saying more than his rude tone, I might have a different answer. But a rude tone is not something you can call a boss out on. You can't, because they're like, hi, just do your work. You know what I mean? Well, hi, everyone who's here. So many people joining. I love it. Another question that came in was from a guy, actually, who said that when a conversation gets tough, that his girlfriend always walks out. She always removes herself. She always finds a way to like make it a fight so she doesn't have to have the hard conversation. So the question is, his question was, how can I change this pattern? Because I hate this pattern and it doesn't let us solve our problems. So here is my answer to you. I think his name was James. And thanks for writing in. We appreciate it. Part of it is when things are good with your girlfriend, not when you are having a tense conversation, not when something is wrong, is when maybe right after you just had amazing sex together, maybe after you just had a nice meal together, something where everything is good. You can ask a question here, please do. This is the time to bring it up. And we're not ever saying you, right? We're saying, hey, I actually noticed this pattern that when we get into a conversation, it seems to get heated or you're afraid it's going to get heated and you leave. And I wanted to know if you would be open to us figuring out a different way of problem solving. Because what happens is you leave, then you come back, we eventually make up, but the problem doesn't get solved. And I really want our problems to be solved because I really love you. Does that make sense, James? Where she may deny it. So let's say she's defensive and denies it and says, no, it's because you're being a jerk. And so I leave. The question, let's lay out how we end up communicating with people in our lives, especially when we're stressed out. If you haven't figured out a different way, if you haven't learned from Terri Cole or someone else how to effectively problem solve, you will most likely revert back to some kind of a default position. So this might be something that you learned in childhood, most likely, because where else were our default positions put in except childhood, family of origin stuff? So I want you to think about your own, because perhaps there's something familiar in your girlfriend's behavior to you. So those of you who know my work, I have this little tool, the 3 questions that we ask when we're trying to understand, why, where have I seen this before? Or why is this the way I'm responding? Because honestly, James, if this wasn't familiar to you in some way, you would most likely not stay with this girlfriend. You would be like, I don't even, who walks out? Like if that didn't happen in your life. So I'm going to ask you to ask yourself the 3 questions, which I'll tell you what they are, and we'll write them for you, which is when you're in that heated moment and that dynamic is happening, you ask, who does this person remind me of? That's the first question. Where have I felt like this before? That's the second question. And why is this behavioral dynamic the way that I'm trying to get her to talk, but she's not talking? Like, right, I'm trying to get something and then she's leaving. How is that experience where you're sort of left with your frustration, with nowhere to put it? How is that familiar to you? So what is the use of the 3 questions? Why do we ask them? Because so much of the time we are repeating something from the past. If we don't find another way to, let's say, learn a new language, I want you to think about communicating, especially in romantic relationships, like an actual language. So as much as you would like to be fluent, perhaps in, I don't know, let's say Mandarin, you won't be fluent in Mandarin unless you learn Mandarin. This is the exact same thing with effective communication. If what you've learned is a dysfunctional way of handling conflict, you won't suddenly know. Usually, it doesn't usually happen that way. that you'll suddenly know an effective way to problem solve, mutual respect, letting that person talk, and then it's your turn to talk, right? So does that make sense to you? You get it? So what now? Let's say that you identify. So maybe James, maybe you're here, maybe you're watching. Maybe you go, "Oh my God, I just realized my father always walked out when my parents had conflict, and my mother was always left. So that's why it's familiar to me. My girlfriend is acting like my father. That is so weird. And I, in this scenario, am behaving like my mother." So once we identify the 50% of changing anything, of course, is awareness. And it's always the first step, because how can you change anything that you are unaware of? You can't. So, James, now that you bring this awareness, let's say, into your mind, you have choices. So instead of just reacting, sort of this rote way, like, "Oh, I guess this is how it is. We're having a conflict. She's going to be out the door and get in her car and maybe call me tomorrow," or whatever her pattern is. You have a choice to do something different. And the first thing and the most effective thing to do is to talk to her when you're not mad. Because so much of the time, clients will say to me, "I'm going to tell him everything is changing," or "I'm going to tell her that we're not doing this anymore." That doesn't work, especially when you're all pissed off. Like, you don't need to have like the conversation every time. Sometimes we do, but honestly, not all the time. And a lot of times when we go, "We need to talk." Is there anyone here on this live when someone says to you, "We need to talk," that you want to talk to them? No. What do you want to do? Avoid them, get away from them, not talk to them. So I think that pre-announcing, it just makes the person who has to do the new thing feel better, like, "I'm going to warn them." Well, I'm saying there's no warning, because if you do it in a healthy way, it doesn't have to be a confrontation. It doesn't have to be a blow up. You can talk to your girlfriend, let's say after a lovely meal out. You can say, "Well, I've noticed this pattern, and I see my part in the pattern. But I really want to see if you would be willing together to figure out a new way of doing it, because we're not actually solving our problems. And it really bums me out, because I mean, so much of the time we have such a great time and I love being with you," or something. We always say something nice. And a lot of times before you're going to go in with something, you you say the nice thing, like, "I really, this is such a beautiful dinner. You look so nice. And it was so lovely to just spend this time with you," or whatever it is that you would say, James. I don't know what it is. And then you move into, can I tell you something? I had this realization. When we're trying to talk to people, when we do it ineffectively, so much of the time, the default position is all about them. We want to be like, "Yeah, guess what, lady, you need to change." That does not make them change or want to change. It just makes people defensive. It's very blocking. So, James, I hope that that was helpful. And let me see. Here we go. Good one from Jacinta. Actually, Jacinta. When they are like that, they are an ego wounded self. So anything you say, they aren't going to be able to understand or hear you anyhow. Best to disengage in a polite manner until a better time. Well, there's truth in that. When you're in the conflict, like even before she's about to go out the door, if you know that that's where she's heading, you can also there's an intervention therapeutically that you can do, which would sort of be like, go and open the door for her before she's about to like slam, like leave and slam the door, like, "I'm walking out on you." You can be like, "I know what comes next. Open the door. Maybe we can talk about this with cooler heads tomorrow." And that would in a way that's a little passive aggressive, but part of it is it could also be a little funny. And the reality is, if that's where she's going, that you're like, "I know that this is your process, so I'm going to let you do it." Jill said, my coworker said, "Can I have a word with you?" And I felt my skin crawl and it wasn't pleasant. It's so true. "Can I have a word with you?" You're like, no. Okay, other questions. My ex-husband used to say, "Can I ask you something?" I'm feeling like, no. Yeah, I think that if the relationship is good, though, if the "can I ask you something," that if that person says that, but it's really a setup to judge you, to tell you their opinion. You know how some people will say, "Hey, can I ask you something?" But they're so not asking you something, something bad is coming. So that's like a setup, because it's not genuine. right? It's like they're not being genuine. They're not actually asking you a question. They're like, I'm not, here's my setup to get to the answer that I want, which does not feel good. I had another question come in, unless you want me to take something from the side, but I would need someone to grab it and text it to me, because there's too many of those. Or I can actually be in Slack too, Joyce, if you want to do it in Slack. It's up to you. Hi. Does that mean I'm toxic? Hold on. I don't know if you do that. And said, how do you break the passive aggressive cycle with communicating with family? Wow, that's really good. So I'm just going to take that one. All right. So first, let's identify what passive aggressive cycle is. This is an indirect way of communicating anger, frustration, annoyance. So a lot of family systems, and they do a lot of triangulating as well, because those are kind of toxic family systems where nobody can be direct. They talk about. So there's always some triangle. It's always like the mother and the daughter talking about the other sister or the brother or the father or whomever. So how do you stop that? Part of the process has to be acknowledging your own part within you. Like you have to be able to sort of look at the system itself and be like, okay, so what part am I playing in this? So let's say triangulation, meaning you have a problem with Bob, but you go to Betty. That's triangulation in a nutshell. It's super easy, but it's super toxic. The first step that you can take to not participate is if Bob comes to you and it's like, I can't believe Betty. You go, hey, you know what? I got to say, Bob, I think you should go directly to Betty with that, which people like flip out when you do that at first. They're like, what do you mean? I always come to you to talk about Betty. You're like, yeah, you know what? It's kind of this low vibe. I'm not into it and I don't want to do it anymore. And I'm really working on not doing that with you anymore. I don't want to, drag you into that. So that's one way, is taking responsibility for yourself. And before we ever look out to be like, how can I change my family system? Hold on one sec. There we go. How can I change my family system? It's like, how can I change me? How can I understand what's going on? And I don't mean codependently fix the family system. I mean, start to bring some actual functional health into the system, even if it's just for you. So, I mean, in my own family, this is like this, but a little bit different. But I got sober about 4 years before anyone else did. I eventually went back and made people come with me. But my family was like, what are you, crazy? Like, what the hell? And so there was a long 4 years of kind of being alone at, holidays where everyone else was completely hammered. And I was like, this is super not Christmassy or fun. But, I dealt with it. I made other plans. I didn't stay there all the time. It's like, you just have to decide, I'm doing this for me. So my advice to you would be, you opt out of the dysfunctional stuff. And then people will start to get interested in what you're doing. And then you can say, if they say, well, I noticed this, or you're doing something, it's also what Deepak would say. He's always like about meditation and everything else. Like, don't proselytize. Like, don't go out there and be like, you all got to meditate. He's like, just live your life as this centered, calm meditator. And people will want to know what you're doing and they'll ask you, and then feel free to tell them. So again, we're not fixing other people. We have to unlearn those dysfunctional, passive aggressive styles ourselves first. So that's step one. Don't worry. In later lives, we'll handle what you do after that. But trust me, that is enough. All right. So next question. I'm going to go over here. And Eileen, Hope, Ruben, Martyr, if you're on here, Dee is doing good. She's in ICU. They're keeping her overnight. So please tell everyone, because I can't text right now. All right. Here we go. Here we're moving on to, okay. My roommate's words are so mean, I can't communicate with her without getting mad and out of my mind. How to communicate with someone mean, rude, and insulting? Well, first of all, start looking for a new roommate, because why we got to live with someone who's mean, rude, and insulting? Like, that would be my first thing, is like, but you are, because there's someone else in your life who is mean, rude, and insulting. So there's something normalized about this experience for you, I believe. And so use the 3 cues, the 3 questions that we put into this for you, and figure out How is her rudeness familiar to you? Because before I can help you, and I'm happy to help you have some language with talking to her, you have to understand your half of the dance. So you have to understand what you're bringing to it, and not in a blame way. And you guys, so much of the time when I talk about this, people are like, no, but she's a jerk. Like, it isn't me. I'm like, okay, she might be a jerk. I'm not saying she's not a jerk. What I'm saying, though, is that before you can get away from the jerk or have an effective conversation with the jerk or have any change with the jerk, you have to know what part of this is familiar to you, right? Why are you staying in a situation? Because unless you're in dire straits and you have to, usually, like if let's think about this with abusive relationships. If you grew up in a family and there was no abuse and nobody was violent, there was no violence whatsoever, and you got into a relationship with someone in some way and they lifted their hand like they were going to hit you, you would never stay. You would not be able to run out of that person's house or apartment fast enough. You would lose their number. You'd be like, bye, because it would be so shocking to you. It's such a red flag. If you came from a family system where there was violence, even if you hated it, and even if you only witnessed it, and I don't mean only because there's secondary trauma for that, but let's say you witnessed it, but it wasn't happening to you, and someone did that, you would hate it. I can't believe it, like my father, like my mother, but you might stay because for you, love and violence, for that person, I don't mean you who asked the question, I just mean you, the person, went like this at an early age. And so why I always say we have to clean up our side of the street first to understand our 50% of what is happening before we can then approach them. And listen, you can do it quickly. I mean, once you actually answer, if you answered those questions, those 3 questions that we put up there for you, you would really see, wow, okay, this does remind me of someone. You're right. I did witness that somewhere. I imagine. Listen, I'm not saying that there's not a possibility in the world, but the possibility that you didn't have some experience with rude, hateful people is small. Because if you didn't, you would most likely not still be living with this roommate like that. And that's no judgment. That's just the fact of how we work as human beings. Make sense? So I want you to ask the 3 Qs and figure out your side of the street, and then don't engage. The most powerful way of getting a message across, especially with people who are aggressive, especially for people who are passive aggressive, we think that if I just use the right words, it's going to change. We think that if whatever it is, that's not true. What is the most effective way of interacting with someone, especially because, yes, okay, so Akun says, that is right, my father, of course. And I'm sorry to hear it because I understand that that's painful. But this, to me, what this means, Akun, is that you need to work out those unresolved injuries that happened for you with your father, with living with someone who was violent either to you or you witnessed it, because that's what's making you try to work it out with this roommate. It's like this is a repeating relationship reality, I call it. And you may or may not work it out with the roommate. Like a lot of times we attract people who are less bad as the original injury was, and we can work it out, especially in romantic relationships, maybe not. But it's very important because what happens is if you haven't done work on this, if you haven't excavated this painful stuff, it's very charged inside of you. So your roommate, and I bet when that person is acting up that way, doesn't just make you mad, but it also scares you like it would when you were a child, because this is also the way human nature works. So I say, remember those things, journal about them, tell the truth about how they felt, write a long letter to your father, even if he's not alive anymore. And you're not even going to send it if he is alive, but a long, unedited letter about, hey, when you did that mean, terrible thing to mom, that made me feel, what happened in my life because of that. I wish that I could beat you up. I wish that I could call the police. I wish that whatever you wished, however you felt, because that stuff is still in there and it's still charged. So if you can get it up and out, honor it. You can share that with a trusted friend who will not say a word, just witness. We're not talking, you're just witnessing, and then you're burning that thing that you wrote. releasing it from your experience. There's all these different rituals that you can do. But that is your first stop. All right, he said, thank you, Terri. I'm so grateful for RLR, she said, Aurora. I will continue to work on slowing down before I react. So incredibly inspiring and empowering. Yay. And someone said, but doesn't effective communication go both ways? So that was a really good question. And with a little bit of time we got left, I want to actually hit it. Yes, it does. But in order for our way, what we're serving up in the relationship, for it to even create the possibility of effective communication really blossoming, we have to be healthy enough to do it. So in every relationship and in every place where there's ineffective communication in your life, even though you want to be like, but that person's a bully and that person's an idiot or whatever, I'm always going to say, bring it back to you, though. What are you doing? Not to provoke the idiot, but what are you doing to keep this dance going? Right? Like James's girlfriend is still walking out the door. So I'm giving him something different to do, like opening the door and be like, okay, Betty, I guess I'll see you tomorrow. Instead of having it work. If her thing of leaving and communicating her upsetness by slamming the door and getting in her car, if that keeps working, because then the next day he's like, hey, Betty, are you okay? She's never changing that. So we're not changing Betty, we're changing James, right? James changes his side of the street. And that's the only place we have power, is with what we're doing, what we're willing to do, what we're going to do. And what we're going to do that's different. Because what happens is that we stay in the same situations. And if we were children and we were in situations where we were victimized, we will find ourselves on one end of that victim stick, either being victimized again, or we can be identified with the aggressor. And then we can be the one who's Betty walking out the door or throwing an ashtray at someone's head. I guess there are no ashtrays anymore because it's not the 70s, but you know what I'm saying? You know what I mean? Those are the two things. And you can vacillate between those things too. In one relationship, you can be victimized. The next one, you can be the aggressor. And then eventually, if you do enough work, you can find that middle ground, you know? So someone is saying about a verbally abusive adult son. So my feeling is remove yourself. So what I was saying before is the most powerful way of communicating something different, if the situation isn't healthy enough to actually use words right now, is to remove yourself, and is to say, hey, Bob, every time you raise your voice, I'm going to ask you to leave. And if Bob is really abusive, if you raise your hand, I'm calling the police. And then you have to do it. Like, you cannot let anyone abuse you. That's it. There are literally no exceptions. None. I can't think of any. There are no exceptions. Because what also we're doing, if we don't change that, is that we're colluding with the lowest part of that other person that we say that we love. When you say no friggin' more, no. Speaking of the door, find it and get out. What you're doing is you're sparing yourself from being abused and drawing a boundary that's appropriate and effective, impactful. And you're also sparing them, even though that's not your job. That's just a byproduct of drawing that boundary. You're sparing them this terrible shit behavior, right? That's dysfunctional. If your adult kid is being abusive, they need therapy. They need help. They've got anger issues. But that, at this point, that's their responsibility. Make sense? I hope that was helpful. Threatening to leave and come back makes things worse every time. That is also abusive behavior. Yeah, threatening to leave is just terrible. Hold on. We got another question that came in through text, so I guess I'm taking that. Okay. So talking about the blame game, and I think this might be the last one that I hit, but about blaming. I want to finish my thought on threatening. Someone said, threatening to leave, because here's the thing, that is emotionally abusive too in its own way. So when I'm talking about leaving, I'm not talking about, you don't have to be saying I'm leaving the relationship unless the person is really abusive, then yes, you should be. But when the behavior starts that you're like, hey, I'm not putting up with you screaming, this will not help. That's when you go, I'm removing myself. So that may mean you leave, that may mean I leave, but what I'm not doing is this. I'm not doing this. So do you understand what I'm saying? I'm not saying threaten to leave and then don't. And I'm not saying every time someone does something you don't like, be like, I'm out of here. I am saying, especially when it's more extreme, in a situation that the woman was sharing about abuse, you're like, no, I'm not allowing you to be abusive because you're above it. And I'm definitely not letting you abuse me, for sure. So there's that. Hold on, here we go. Let's talk about blame. And then I swear this will be the last thing while I'm suddenly sweating. The blame game. So communication blocking. There's so much communication blocking that happens when we get into this. It's like a cycle of blame where we're holding grudges against the people in our life, where we keep being like reminding them, yeah, well, that was your fault if we hadn't done that. It is one of the most toxic things that just erodes whatever you build, whatever goodwill you build in a relationship, which we need the goodwill because there's going to be other challenging things that happen in life. People get sick, people die, stuff happens, people lose their job. So when the going gets tough and you have zero reserve of goodwill between you because you haven't built it up because you're too busy being petty about bullshit, that a lot of relationships do not survive the hard time. So how do we build goodwill? One thing is stop being a blamer. You might have come from a long line of blamers. And if your partner is a blamer, you can be like, you know what? Blame, shame, guilt, the trifecta of bad for relationships. So can we please work on not blaming? It doesn't help. It is not effective problem solving. And I'm working on my part. I'm really working to not blame. And I'm going to ask you to do the same. And can we have an agreement that if either one of us is blaming, that we will point it out and we will go a different direction or something? There's a way to do it. Trust me. I teach people how to do it all the time. There's a way to do it. But you have to be willing. Just because, let's just say your partner is a blamer, that doesn't mean you should let them make you be a blamer too. And don't take the blame. You can say, you know what? That is not productive. I'm actually not taking that on. I did not do that on purpose. And it's super unkind of you to be pointing that out when you know I felt bad about it. Not cool, Bob. Not cool. Stop doing that, Bob. So that's one thing with blame, where even if they blame you, when people go, well, they blame me, I'm like, reject the blame. Reject the blame. I'm not taking that on. I'm not. And what are you getting out of blaming me? So what? It's funny. When I came into a family system that was very male dominated, so 3 teenage boys and a father, there was a lot of blame and super, like tons of interest in whose fault was what. It didn't matter. Like, even if it was like nothing, like we're sitting in traffic. Well, if we had left 20 minutes earlier, then we wouldn't be here because this is, hi, but we're here now, aren't we? So we can either waste the time we're sitting in the car talking about whose friggin' fault it is, or we can listen to music, talk, laugh, talk about your day, like connect, be normal. We could. So anyway, that took a little bit to shift. And not that they were blaming me, but I saw so much blame of each other. You know what I mean? All right, moving on. We got the blame game, I think. All right, 7:34, you guys. I said it was going to be half an hour, but then I talked for longer. I hope this is helpful. Maybe they are watching too many Bravo Housewives TV show. LOL. Okay. Yes. Someone's saying out of an abusive relationship with a hoovering, I think you meant ex, so narc, and wasn't feeling strong today because I do miss the good things with him. I know, but we can't. We just can't. Because you know what? In the end, the good will not ever outweigh the damage that's done to your self-esteem, your soul, your personhood when we're with someone who's abusive. It just won't. So, but it's okay. I understand. And listen, this is the complexity of being a human being. We love to make it black and white and two-dimensional, like, well, he was just a dick. That was it. He's bye, good riddance to whatever. No, when we love people, we love them for a reason. It isn't just a repetition of some crap from our childhood. There's good things as well. And so that's what makes it hard, because if there wasn't, it would be easy to leave people. But it's hard because you make a little unit for that period of time. But the more you learn about abuse, the more empowered you'll be to be able to recognize it early, see the signs, and not allow yourself to go there. Somebody raising their voice, no. And listen, whatever. I come from a don't raise your voice ever place. So you can't listen. I mean, some people do it and they don't mind. There are different models of couples that they can have these, fiery fights, and then they make up and it's okay, but it's not abusive because they're the same, and they're not like saying the meanest thing they can think of to each other, but they have conflict and it's not like the worst thing. It's definitely not my favorite thing though. So, but that doesn't mean that it's bad. It's bad though if it's verbal abuse, emotional abuse, threatening to leave every time there's a problem. Like, well, I'll pack up my shit and get out of here. Like, that's who can build a relationship with someone who's doing that? And these are all ways that people will try to dominate us. Like, it's all about control, right? What is abuse? If we had to say like the definition, it's basically somebody punishing another person in some way, verbally, emotionally, psychologically, or physically, for something that they think they shouldn't have done. It's a punishment and a means of controlling what the person does. That's basically what abuse is. There we go. There you have it, people. All right. Oh my God, you're so cute. Aurora's like, enroll in Terry's courses helped me after years of therapy and being told I would never heal. You know what, Aurora, get in touch with Joyce. Give us a testimonial. That's so exciting. She's like, what therapy couldn't fix, Real Love Revolution could. Yay. I love that. Of course you can heal. Of course you can heal. Obviously, or I'd be doing something else for a living. Anyway, you guys, I super love that so many of you spent so much time here with me tonight. We're going to do this again next month. And then come the summer, and we might do it more, because I'm going to say come by August, I'll be doing something weekly. Moving into September, because we have our Boundary Boot Camp course for women starting in September. So you know that I love to talk about boundaries and effective communication and love and everything before launching the course, and giving you an opportunity to join the course if you can. And hey, if you can't, then you've learned tons from me in those 6 weeks that go before the actual course starts. Okay, you guys, so you are so welcome. To be continued. I'm going to end the stream, and then someone on my team is going to do something with it. All right, you guys, I will see you in a month. And yes, I will see you also in the Facebook group and everywhere else that I see you. And I want you to look for next Mondays. It's Tuesday we're releasing, but it's all about the 8 traits of toxic or dysfunctional family systems. And I think that you will love it. I really do. So look for that, and let's talk about it in the interweb, shall we? All right. Bye.